Hey, I just left the asylum office at the Houston Asylum Office, and I wanted to let you know about a couple of big changes. Things are really different there. So I wanted to let you guys know what you can expect. First of all, if you have an interview coming up at the asylum office anytime soon, but also there are implications, and it's going to have an impact on people who haven't yet had their interview scheduled and for whom their interview might not happen for a while. So I'm in Houston, Texas. And by the way, if we're just not meeting, I'm Brian Manning, and I'm an asylum lawyer in Houston, but I help people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. So today I was at the Houston Asylum Office representing a client, and as you can imagine, they're doing things differently because of the pandemic, the coronavirus. And I got to say, they did an excellent job with this in terms of making it a safe environment. I felt completely at ease and safe in terms of social distancing and the precautions that they were taking. In fact, they've gone really, really far in trying to make sure that it's safe. So it's actually a totally different experience right now here in Houston. And other offices, asylum offices across the country are probably doing similar. I know some of them are doing similar things. And I'm sure all of them are taking some kinds of precautions. So you can probably expect something like what I'm about to describe at any of the asylum offices. So the biggest difference is that they're only doing a few interviews a day right now. And that's so that they can keep people apart from each other, both applicants and the people that they come in with their attorneys and interpreters, but also the people who work at the asylum office, right? They don't want their normal work staff load there. It would just be too many people in close contact with each other. So they're just doing a handful of interviews a day. In Houston right now, they're just doing 3 interviews a day. And by way of comparison, at an asylum office, there's going to be, depending on the office, somewhere between like 40 and 100, maybe even 120 asylum officers who work there and are doing interviews. And maybe half of them at a given time are assigned to be doing for a 2 or 4 week period, well, usually at least a 4 week period, to be doing affirmative asylum cases, interviews for asylum. And when they do that, an officer who's doing asylum interviews for a period of time does normally 2 a day, about 4 times a week. And so if you have 40 asylum officers doing 2 interviews a day, well, that's 80 interviews a day getting done at an asylum office under normal conditions. But because of the pandemic, they're doing 3 interviews total right now in Houston. So when you go in there, it's a ghost town. I mean, there's almost no one there. They have someone meet you basically in the lobby of the building and ask you some questions about whether you've been feeling okay or been around someone who has been sick. And then they take you upstairs and you do the check-in in the way that you would normally do for an asylum interview, which is you go up, where you go through security first, and then you go into a waiting room, and the person seeking asylum has to give a fingerprint and have their photo taken. And there's no one in there. They've taken the seating out of there. There's a little bit along the walls, but that's it. And you have kind of an escort or a monitor, one of the people who works at the asylum office who's walking with you and saying, okay, go in here and check in, and then wait for a couple minutes, and they come back and get you. And then you go to your interview room. Now, here's something that's very different than under normal circumstances. Right now, there is one person per room, one person who is involved in the interview in each of them in their separate room. So the asylum officer is in one room. The asylum applicant is in one room. If they have a lawyer, the lawyer is in another room. If they have an interpreter, that interpreter is in another room. So that was the case today. There were 4 of us involved, and we took up 4 rooms in the facility. So even if they wanted to do more interviews in a day, they couldn't do that many more if they want to stick to this this method of keeping everyone in their own separate rooms for safety purposes, for health reasons. And so when you go in the room, there's an iPad set up. And on the desk, and it's already logged in to a shared meeting room, just kind of like Skype, but in this case they use Microsoft Offices. And you do the interview like that, looking into an iPad, and the officer's looking into their computer, talking to you, and you're talking into an iPad. Now, the audio is not coming through the iPad, but rather through a telephone, where everyone is dialed into the same phone number. So you're using a speakerphone on a physical telephone that's next to the iPad. And otherwise, the interview is normal in the sense that the officer does the same things. They ask you the same questions that they would have asked in the past. It's just that it's very different atmosphere because you're alone in a room, and it's difficult to explain, but it's a very different dynamic. You feel like the space and the loneliness, I would even say, or the isolation. It makes it a little bit harder to, I think, to develop rapport. Not that an asylum applicant or their lawyer should be going out of their way to try to be buddy buddy with the officer. That's not what you're there for. But still, oftentimes in an asylum interview, you do sense that there's a kind of human connection that's established. And I think it's a lot harder to do that when you're talking about doing it by video conference, even though you're in the same building. So it's very different. So you need to, if you have an interview that's already been scheduled and it hasn't been canceled, it's still coming up, be ready for that, know what to expect. It's going to be a video conference interview. This has implications, big ones for everyone who has got an asylum application pending or who's going to apply soon, because the fact that they're only able to do so few interviews right now for some period of time. We don't know how long this is going to last, and I'm sure they don't know how long it's going to last. It's all dictated by the conditions on the ground in the cities or regions where the asylum offices are located. But it's going to continue for a while, doing just a handful of interviews a day. But I mean, even if they double or triple the numbers that they're doing now, they're still going to be nowhere close to the normal caseload that they handle in normal times. And so that means it's going to slow the timeline a little bit. The cases in Houston were going really fast before the slowdown. People were getting an interview about a month, sometimes 1 month, but often about 2 or 3 months after applying. They were getting their interviews and getting a decision often 2 weeks later. But this method of operating, where they're doing these very socially distanced interviews, is going to slow things down because they're doing fewer interviews. So they're working through the queue or the line of cases a lot more slowly than they otherwise would. So if you haven't already been informed that you have an interview, or if you're going to apply for asylum and you haven't yet, it's probably going to take a while longer than it would have had this pandemic not been disrupting things. So those are the major takeaways. Be ready for an atmosphere that's very different. When you read online about what happens at an asylum interview or watch YouTube videos about it or whatever, this is different because you're not in the same room, and it's a different feel for sure. And then also timelines are probably going to be a bit slower for scheduling interviews. So if you have questions about this, just leave them down below this video in the comment box, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. If you want to send me a message, do that through the Manning Asylum Law Facebook page. I'm happy to see if I can help you, or give my office a call if you want to set up a time to talk to me about your situation and see if I might be able to help you. It's 713-909-0401. Again, 713-909-0401. And I'm Brian Manning for Manning Asylum Law. Thanks.